You've just started podcast number 140. What do you do with troublesome team members or personalities? Stay with us.
This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome, everybody. I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving and that you got everything that you wanted to, and you had a peaceful and kind of laid-back day with some good food and a little bit of a rest from your normal daily cycle. And I just wanted to say that I think thankfulness really reframes things for us mentally. I know in my morning routine, which I talked to you about 2 weeks ago on that podcast titled Morning Routine, we talked about the importance of being thankful in the mornings to really reframe where our mind is. I really like that thought, count your blessings, or, count our blessings. And if we do that, we'll see how wonderful and how good and how positive things actually are. And in fact, I have my wife, Katie, with me. Say hi, Katie.
Hello.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm a little bit grumpy, she'll say, you know what? You have a good life. Like, you have an amazing wife. You have wonderful children. Everyone's happy and healthy. People are just doing well. You have a roof over your head. Good job. Count your blessings. You won't be so grumpy. And so I just wanted to kick off this podcast by saying what I'm excited about is the gratefulness and thankfulness that we were able to get and kind of reset yesterday. So before we go on to our main content, I have two little bits, and then Katie and I are going to cover a topic about what do we do when we have troublesome team members, personalities, difficulties with family dynamics, things like that. How can we assume and identify positive intent? And so one thing that I wanted to say, I always like to start out with, what am I excited about in life? Right now, I'm excited about coaching and coaching calls. I've had quite a few of these scheduled recently, and I've just been impressed with how effective coaching can be, because once you can find somebody's core truth, what's important to them, what their goals are, how they want to live, you can usually find you can find a direction every time that will help them in all of their decisions and really help them shape the kind of life that they want to have. And so just want to say, if you ever have need or you feel stuck or there's a question that you have, please consider getting a coach. Again, you can reach out to me if you want to, if it's specific to construction or personal development or families or anything like that. But please just consider, if you need a coach, make sure that you're having somebody help you get to that next level. And just like Tony Robbins says, if you want to head to the next level, you have to find somebody who you want to model, somebody that you think is in the spot or at least close to where you're headed or knows how to go where you're headed. Models and mentors, people that can really tell you how they did it, how they got there, and help you to be successful is the key, because again, you're the average of your 5 closest friends. So please consider coaching. So the last thing before we get into our topic is I got some feedback and a little bit of a question here. And this is what this person says. Thank you for the feedback, but this is what he says. I got introduced to your podcast by a colleague of mine. I just want to say I enjoy listening and learning. Thank you, sir. I wanted to introduce a topic, if possible. How is the construction industry changing? An example would be a lot more prefabrication nowadays. So this is such an important and impactful question or thought or topic that I want to cover this over the next couple of podcasts. So I'll give you just a teaser today. Let me give you the problem, and then I'll talk to you about some of the cool things that are happening in some of the next podcasts. So one of the problems that I see is that technology is shooting through the roof, and we're forgetting about some of the back to basics techniques and processes and fundamentals and philosophies that really do us well on the construction site. And I think we feel, or some people do, technology is going to make up for those back to basics techniques and is going to cover or fix or improve our industry to the point that we won't need to go back to training and help the basics of what we do with our workers. It might supplement the fact that we have to learn some of these back to basics things. And so I think that is actually hurting us. So a bad industry trend right now that I see is that we have way too much technology versus how much training that we have, and training specifically for our workers and people coming into this industry. So I want to challenge us to really double down on our training and get good at our back to basics techniques and principles that will make us great. So I'll cover more about this topic tomorrow. So here's some conflict for us today. Most of the time we assume negative intent, and we will be benefited on our leadership if we can get past that. So that's the topic that I want to introduce today. And so let me kick us off with a question. So Katie, you're the one that brought this subject up to me a while back when you asked me to read the book Changeable. Mm-hmm. And so I just like your thoughts. Why did you start reading it? What did you learn? What thoughts have been on your mind in relation to this subject?
All right. So I was scrolling through Jason's Facebook and I saw a recommendation for the book Changeable by Stewart Ablin. And the person that had posted said it was the best book that she'd ever read and that everyone should read it, everyone in school systems. And so I was intrigued and I bought the book and I read it. And I told Jason, you have to read this book. Like, it's so amazing. And he read the book. It took him forever to finish the book. He hated it. He griped every time he finished a chapter. He complained about literally every step of the way, wanted to write a bad review. Like, he hated the book. He argued with me about just the most nonsensical things. It won't work. It doesn't work. This is like literally, he was like, this is the worst book I've ever. And that was in February that we read it.
Yeah.
And literally, anytime he thinks of the book, he proceeds to go on this tirade about how much he hated the book. So that is really where I first learned that there was a thing like skill, not will. And then, of course,
just to interrupt you. So the premise of the book is, so if you do read it, you might end up doing like I do or did, where I was yelling at my radio, listening to it, arguing with this guy because, well, this will all have a happy ending. But I was mad because he says that most of the time or all the time, it's a skill problem, not a will problem, meaning that people want to do the right thing, but they don't have the skills to do it, right? And so I feel like that's a lot of victim talk, or I did, and I feel like it's come to full circle for me. But yes, I was very angry. I was yelling at the radio, and I've been obstinate about it ever since. But
okay, so also then I was listening to the podcast between it was a podcast interview that Russell Brand did with Brené Brown. And she pretty much confirmed the same thing with the idea that you can just assume that everyone is doing their best. So Jason really likes Brené Brown, so I thought maybe he would respect her opinion. But that didn't really work either. So we've kind of just trucked along with this different philosophy about things for a while now, but now he's seen the light. So that's really what we're here to talk about. That's the only reason there's a podcast today, is because he has finally seen the error of his ways.
Well, I think that's true. So my point is, it's important enough to have it on a podcast. If this thing has been eating at me for a year and now all of a sudden I finally figure out what's going on, I think it's pertinent to share with other people, because when we're dealing with folks, my argument was there are people out there that have the opportunity to respond in a positive and a kind and a collaborative way. Let's say, for instance, and for those of you who are in construction, I'm assuming most people that listen to my podcast are in construction. Let's say you have an obstinate trade partner, foreman, or somebody on the team. Let's say on the GC, the superintendent is super difficult. Or, there's this worker that's just argumentative, doesn't like, just like the other day, there was somebody that was started to yell at me about COVID-19 and masks and this and that and conspiracy theories. And I'm like, hey, dude, well, I just need you to follow the rules. So there are these people out there that will get after us, that will do things that they know better. I believe they know better, right? They'll trash the bathrooms, or they'll start an argument in the trade partner meeting, or they'll do something unsafe or whatever. And I'm like, dude, you know better. You're just willfully not doing this, right? So I feel like the comment that says everything's skill, not will, was kind of a cop-out. But I'm starting to see it a little bit differently, and that's what we want to talk about today. But before we get to my enlightenment, can you tell me why you like the concept? Why did you think, Katie, that it was, okay, here's a solution for me, my kids, my relationships? Like, why did you like it?
I think probably all right, well, so I have 11 kids, and then I've got this spouse, like Jason and I, for now, Jason and I are like complete opposites. So if I were probably differently inclined, everything that he does would annoy me. But I'm super patient. And anyway, as I'm reading the book, I just feel like, okay, this is just perhaps me having a better way to interpret interactions. So like I said, I have 11 kids with 11 crazy different personalities, and it's hard sometimes when you're just consistently clashing with people, especially as they get older, and they're teenagers now, and they have more to say and more opinions that, are valid for them. And it just felt like maybe the missing piece where I'm super, unemotional and just kind of logistical about things and want to just be like, cut the BS, like you did this, it doesn't matter. But, people always have a backstory for why they did something. So the book was really revelatory in my process for, it doesn't really matter why somebody did something. Just knowing that there might be a backstory helped me see that it wasn't just defiance. It wasn't just, somebody's out to get you or whatever. They just hate you. It's, there's a reason, which that sounds really basic now that I'm saying it out loud.
But it's true. And two things, and then please interrupt me whenever you want to chime in and say something here. I have had one of the biggest blind spots that I've had in my career for a long time is if I throw somebody away, it can be really cold. I can be really distant. In fact, people have said that as soon as they, get on my bad side, they're like, Jason's like emotionally shut me out completely. And that's because I feel attacked. We're heading in a good direction. We're doing these wonderful things. And then somebody dissents or tears down or tries to tear down, according to my old way of thinking, what we're doing, and becomes an adversary. I become really distant, really cold. And in fact, a business unit leader at DPR one time said, Jason, when you're cold, it's really cold. Like, you meaning you're really distant. This has always been a blind spot for me. So I was interested in how to fix it, but I didn't like this skill, not will thing. Like, okay, so everyone's off the hook. They're just lacking some skill and they can treat me like crap. But here is what really tied it together for me. And I feel like I'm emotionally and intellectually whole now, is that Tony Robbins, whom I believe. So Katie and Stewart said it. I didn't believe them, but Tony said it, so I believed them. Mm-hmm. I do that to you all the time. Anyway,
par for the course.
So Tony said, and so I was listening. I have this online coaching certification program, and I go through these videos, and I could watch it 100 times and learn something new. He's in there in the video, and he says, everyone has a positive intent. He said, I assume that everyone with whatever they're doing, they have a positive intent somewhere in there. And I'm like, what? Like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But then he started to explain it to me, right? So he was coaching a guy who was being a little bit mean or distant to his wife, right? And it come to find out, psychologically, he was acting that way because he was protecting himself out of fear. So even though it was a selfish motive, the good intent was he was protecting himself. If somebody said, hey, person A protected themselves today, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's positive. You know what I mean? But then we put it in context and we're like, ooh, that looks a little bit weird. But at the end of the day, it was a positive intent that caused a negative behavior. And so I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense. So then Katie and I, we were having this discussion this afternoon. I'm like, okay, let's watch some of our kids. And Liam, who's one of our more sporty, what would you say? Rambunctious. He's gonna be like president of the United States one day. He's just all over the place. So he's the most like Calvin and Hobbes, like in our entire family. And so he's like, Ridley, stop doing that, and like yelling at him. So he did this negative thing. And usually I'm like, Liam. And so I do the same thing. I yell at him. I'm like, stop yelling. And so, but instead of doing that this time, I'm like, okay, let's see if this works. So he yells at Ridley. And then we were watching what was going on. Ridley was tearing up the little racetrack that I built for the kids on Thanksgiving Day. So there was a positive intent. He wanted to preserve the racetrack for everyone else and himself. And so then we start going through these examples, Katie and me, and we're like, oh my gosh, every negative behavior that at least we're seeing or thinking of has a positive intent somewhere in there. Somebody has a goal. And that was revelatory, because if you can know what the positive intent is, then all it is about from then on is how do you help that person accomplish their positive intent in a positive way instead of a counterproductive way. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think probably the natural inclination is to do like what you did when you first hear about this concept and say, well, what about criminals? What about rapists? What about abusers? What about, what's the positive intent there?
Well, that's a difficult one, because like when it comes to, like child molestation or rape or things like that, I don't even want to cover that topic because it's so horrible. I don't even know how to address the subject. But like, let's say robbery, right? And if you know me, I would be the hardest on criminals, anywhere. So I'm not being lax at all. So if you're getting mad at me, please just know that I'm trying to see things a different way. And it doesn't necessarily show exactly what I believe or what I would do. But let me just take like robbery. What is the positive intent? So just think on your end of the podcast, why did they rob a bank or a store or whatever? Okay, so it's to preserve certainty, to care for themselves, maybe even some people at home, maybe their dog, whatever situation they have, is to provide for their own needs. So if you said, okay, person A, good person A over here off to the side, is going to provide for their own needs, well, that's a good thing. Oh, yeah, person A is doing a good job. But then when we say, okay, a criminal robbing a bank is doing that, they still have a positive intent. There's something they're doing, but they're doing it the wrong way. And so what Stewart Ablin was saying in his book was, when it comes to prison reform, the key is to understand the intent and provide training and context for people so that they can go provide for themselves or do these positive intent things for themselves in a positive way, which doesn't break the law. Did you have something to say?
No, I was just going to say, so obviously we're going to leave the heavy subjects alone, but overall, generally, if you can take your interactions and, whether at work or at home, and assume the intent is good, that the intent is not out to hurt you or get at you, if you can start there with that assumption, it's really more about the way that you react and the way that you are able to, now that you have kind of reached this. So now that you've reached this new space, that it's about trying to help them meet their needs, because that's what they're trying to do through all of their interactions, is they're just trying to have their needs be met. But also you have your needs that need to be met as well in whatever relationship that you're in, be at work or at home.
And the way this applies to work, in my opinion, is, so let me give you an example. I was at a project site the other day, and the lead superintendent said there was a trade partner a foreman, who was getting belligerent in the meeting, and I excused him from the meeting because he was being, cantankerous. He was arguing, and he was showing dissension, and was really tearing down the rest of the team, right? So I'm not saying the lead super did anything wrong. In fact, I'm glad that he corrected the situation, but I think this can be helpful. So in that situation, maybe even if the person doesn't think about it at the time, even reflecting later on can help bridge this gap and fix it, right? So if that foreman is arguing and you said, well, okay, what's going on here? Is the positive intent that he's struggling to understand and is just scratching and clawing and trying to understand? Well, if that's the case, then we can pause and I can help explain it better to help him meet his needs. Or is he arguing and being cantankerous because he's fearful about his company losing out on something? And if that's the case, I can say, all right, hey, time out. We're going to find a win-win here. So we will find a solution for your company that wins, where you make money, and something that works for the schedule for the overall project. Maybe the conversation would have headed in a different direction. But in that moment, it's hard for me, it's hard for anybody to see anything past the argument, the behavior, the negativity, and the thought, I'm just going to get rid of this person, I'm going to kick him out of the meeting, right? So in our interactions, whether it's with an owner, whether it's with a trade partner, a foreman, a team member, or an inspector, right? An inspector, if they come out, even if it's a little bit nefarious in the sense that they're canceling an inspection, or they're going to charge us for a reinspection because they want to be big dog and they have a feeling of importance, and by controlling you and making your life miserable, they're getting that. They're getting a feeling of importance. They're lording over you. Okay, their positive intent wasn't lording over you, but it was to feel significant. So then to manage that inspector in the future, how can you help that inspector feel significant when you come out and prevent all of these negative behaviors? And somebody would say, well, am I obligated to do that? Do I have to do that? Is that my responsibility? Well, no. As a human being, though, I think we could say it is. And do we want to deal with the outlash, the backlash, the trouble that's caused by not doing it? Not that people are holding us hostage, but there's an easier, smoother, kinder, loving, just better way to live possibly
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'm actually not. If nothing else, it gives you a better way to behave. Then you don't have to get in the mud with them. You don't have to, or whatever you say, get in the box with them.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to just kind of step back and be unemotional because, then you don't have to have that rising passion and meet them where they are. You're able to kind of maintain focus and keep things on your terms through.
Yeah, you have control, right?
Right.
I like that because at the end of the day, we're supposed to be in control of our jobs. And so when somebody said, assume they're doing their best and it's skill, not will, I was like, okay, well, what do you want me to do with that? But now that I know how to use it and help and correct the situation, I think it's fantastic. So let me just go through this quickly. Is your owner creating chaos because of skill or will? Maybe they don't know any better. Maybe they've dealt with 100 other bad contractors and they're just treating you the same way because they don't know any better. Or the trade partner foreman. Maybe they've been, maybe they've been screwed over for 40 years by bad superintendents and you're the first good super they've worked with and they lack the skills. They don't know how to communicate, right? Or with your children. Maybe they're doing something good. They're like, hey, I was trying to keep my baby brother safe and the only tool I had in my toolbox was yelling at him, right? So the next time, hey, I can't believe I'm aligning with this book that I just said, hey, but I just, maybe that is like, I lack the skill, but I do want to do the right thing. And I think just like Tony Robbins and Stewart and Katie are saying is assume that nobody willfully wants to do badly, even criminals.
Well, very few people.
Very few. Okay. Yeah.
Truly evil people, I think probably do.
Yeah.
Although even so, who's to judge that? We don't know.
Well, yeah.
Again, let's set the heavy stuff aside.
Yeah.
Most people, in general, that you come in contact with are not seeking malicious intent.
Yeah.
In your life or, in their relationships.
And it's hard for me to say because sometimes when I'm doing my morning huddle speeches, I'll say, if you're trashing the bathroom, you're an a-hole. Like I'll say that to 500 people on site. At the end of the day, is it a skill thing? Do they know what's expected? Do they know how to notice waste? Are they used to that? Is that how they were brought up? Is that how the only thing they've ever seen? So I think that we can have just a lot more success if we can identify what the positive intent is, understand that maybe they lack the skill, they're probably doing their best, and then once you know what their positive intent is, then you can focus on the win-win and help them accomplish their goals while also accomplishing a win situation for you and have them do it in the right way. And that's why this concept is so important for me, because anybody in construction, you've been backed up against the wall before. You've had to deal with some horrible situations. You've been, right at the end of the barrel dealing with an inspector. You've had to deal with a cantankerous employee. You've been in arguments with that trade partner foreman. You've had fights with your team member, with the superintendent. And if you can find this, then we can focus on the win-win and really succeed, I think. So I really hope you've enjoyed this concept. So Katie, do you have any challenges? What would you challenge the audience to do after this? So great podcast. We did a great job. They'll probably say I did a better job than you. No big deal. But
that's okay.
What challenge would you give the listeners today to where they can go implement this in their lives?
All right. I guess my parting comment would be to read the book. It's a really great book. It covers so many topics and in the end, it's a much less complicated way to live where you're not constantly assuming the worst about people, and that you're able to it's a freeing place when you don't have to take on the emotional weight of, that person's out to get me. It's really freeing. So that's it.
I love it. And, it really puts you back in control. Can you imagine every tough situation that you find yourself in? You can evaluate, find out what their positive intention is, help them get a path to accomplish that works for both of you, and always stay above the fray. Always stay out of the mud. Never get in trouble. Really be able to help people along the way. Not be manipulative, but really get a win-win situation. And that takes us from reactive mode and employee mode to like director, executive, creator mode, meaning we can control these situations and really find a win-win for people and bless people's lives. So I hope you've enjoyed this content. It's much more impactful than Katie and I are giving it credit by description. Please listen to this podcast. Please take this seriously, because if you implement this step and really have it click, this will be game-changing in your everyday interactions. On we go.
On we go.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.